Hello, my dear audience. Kristina here. Today is a new episode of Kim Podcast Growing Business Only with Kristina. But I wanted to say that we will have such a series of episodes with amazing Ashleigh Alsadie, far away from Australia. She is the founder of PromoDonna Agency for cold calling, and today we are going to go deep dive in our topics, and it will be so interesting and wonderful for you to hear this episode. So, Ashley, welcome this to the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's so wonderful to be back. I think, you and I both agreed that the last episode we did together, we touched on a few or a wide range of things when it came to sales and cold calling. And we could have talked for hours. So, the fact that we are now running a series on this, I'm really excited to kind of deep dive into different topics, specific topics, and obviously help everyone with their cold calling and sales.
Thank you so much. And just a little your short intro, because we had a previous where it was very our podcast episode. But just for our audience who don't know you, who are going to see you for the first time, let's your short intro, and we're going to get deep dive in our topic today.
Wonderful. Well, yes, that's exactly right. There's probably listeners that may not have heard me before. So for those of you that don't know me, yes, Ashleigh Alsadie is my name. I am better known as the cold calling queen by many. So I am that rare and crazy breed that loves doing all the sales grunt work that a lot of people avoid, which is cold calling. And I've done that now, gosh, for such a long time. I've been running the PromoDonna, my agency, for 15 years this year. And I can't believe that. It's really flown. And we've worked with hundreds of companies all around Australia, with our main focus being generating high quality sales leads or sales appointments. And I think that's what makes me different from a lot of, say, sales trainers or sales coaches is I walk the talk. Every single day I'm in the trenches, I'm still making cold calls. So I still know what works and what doesn't in the market.
Yeah, I see that. And today is going to be a very interesting episode because we wanted to talk today about the practical scripts and
Yeah.
mindset shifts help you feel empowered on the phone. So Ashley, can you share with us what is that mindset? What is that mindset number one, which block and kills confidence on the phone? And also, we're going to get deep in your practical scripts for our audience to share with us.
That's right. Well, this is such a great question because, I'm such a big believer that when it comes to sales and cold calling for that matter, there's no possible way that you'll generate results if you don't master your mindset. Sales, your mindset is everything. So, and also I'll say that the mindset side of things really ties in with why we're talking about having a script and practical methods of building or developing a script. Because for listeners, those listening thinking, oh, I would love to make sales calls or make cold calls, but I fear the phone, I don't want to pick it up. I will say that over my years of experience, I've found the main reason for that is usually because people don't know what to say or when to say it. So, one of the ways of overcoming that hurdle or mastering our mindset in that sense is to have a really great script that you can follow as a guide. I would say there, don't read it verbatim, but it's great to have a guide so that you feel that confidence when you're picking up the phone. Okay, I know what I'm going to say. I know my elevator pitch. I know how to handle objections, all of that fun stuff. But I'll also say that, and we'll deep dive into this, that part of mastering your mindset is about your preparation before you pick up the phone. And we can obviously talk through that. But yeah, mindset is everything. And I would say it's the first step in achieving sales success.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that mindset is everything, because we really need to train our brain in some way to prepare for that script. We don't need to say like parrots, I'm going to ask uh, what I'm going to ask, but also we need to know what we are going to say, and most of and many of those things. And before you get into that, I just wanted to ask you, maybe you can give us your go-to opening line that works every time. And
Yes.
then
Would
we
you Do you know what? I'm gonna before I jump into the go-to line, because that's kind of the elevator pitch, right? This is that elevator pitch that we all talk about. I'm actually gonna take it one step back to talk about mastering our mindset, because I guess what we're doing here, and for listeners, I'm gonna walk you through step by step how I develop my scripts or how I enter a sales cold calling session. And the elevator pitch is definitely one of the first steps. But even before that, what I'll do is I'll talk everyone through, how do I master my mindset and how do I allow my team to do that too? So
and
for
especially when you do for your clients, you need to educate yourself about that company, to know a lot of things that you can go and your team to do cold calls for them.
that is right. And so when we look at mindset, when we're developing a script, you actually break it down into two components. So the first component, because what you kind of acknowledged about the client preparation, understanding their business is spot on. So that's probably step number one, is understanding your products and services in relation to what the prospects want. So this is what's really key. When a client starts with the PromoDonna, quite often I'll say, okay, give me your pitch, tell me all about your business, tell me why people would buy from you. And they usually kind of ramble on about, oh, this is how great we are. We've been in business for 15 years, whatever it may be. But the prospect doesn't care about that. They only care about what's in it for them. So if you don't acknowledge that in your script, especially in your elevator pitch, the call's not going to go any further. So for listeners, I'll give you an example, and this is again talking about preparation and getting it right before we even develop the script. So if I was to write this about the PromoDonna, I would first, if I was going to do it the wrong way, I would say the PromoDonna, we've been running for 15 years. I've got a great team. They're local, basically talking about how great we are. If I shift that to the what's in it for them, I would say something like the PromoDonna, we're a cold calling agency based in Sydney. We alleviate all of that grunt sales work that you don't want to do so that you can boost your revenue and grow your business, something along those lines. Because if you listen to that language, it's, we're alleviating them of grunt pain work that they don't want to do. We're helping them to grow their business, which they may be struggling with. So if you can demonstrate, again, how you help your clients to overcome their pain points, that's half the battle. So that's preparation or mindset, shift number one, component number one. The second part, after we've done our research and gone, okay, that's how we help people, that's what's in it for them. The second half is we need to master our mindset before we go into any, sales session. And what I do to do that, because you might be sitting there thinking, well, how do you master your mindset? It's going to be done a few ways. Number one, set some goals for yourself. And you need to have very clear goals. And I write them down as if I've already achieved them. So, for example, if I have a sales session for a client where I'm going to cold call, I'll pick up my piece of paper here and I'll write, I generated 5 appointments for XYZ client. And I'll write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the page. And it's amazing how my brain starts to filter for the results it thinks it already has. And it makes the no's a little bit easier too. So goal setting is really important. The other thing is be aware of the energy that you're feeding down the line. And people often say, well, what do you mean by that, right? I am such a big believer that, energy is contagious. And if we get on the phone and we're in a negative mindset or, we've got this negative energy, the results are not going to come about. So I always say to my team, listen to some meditation music or go for a walk or, do something to get into that peak mindset. And, you'll see the results flow from there. So that's kind of step one in my script development process is I write down some goals for myself. So set them up at the top of the script. I get really clear on, what I'm trying to achieve, but also am I in the right mindset? And then I have this preparation or, language or wording around what's in it for the prospect. What am I selling that's going to help them?
It's very interesting. And yeah, about the mindset and that preparation. And also either what you do for your clients, you also do a coaching, in that way.
That's right. Yeah.
To educate your clients to do it.
Yeah, look,
In a way to get results, of course.
100%. And I think, what you're kind of getting at is, like in a sense, when we partner with our clients in those initial stages, it does almost become a bit like coaching because so often they're really focused on just selling how great they are rather than honing in on how are they helping their clients. Because that's the other really big part of shifting your sales mindset is if you fear sales or you don't want to be seen as a salesperson, it's because, you're not focused on genuinely helping people, knowing that sales is just that, it's about helping people. So, we often coach our clients, kind of have them understand this isn't about your brand, it's more about your audience and, their pain points and their challenges and how you can help them to overcome that. But also, I think it's really powerful that when we go to market and we then get the market feedback, that also in turn allows us to kind of coach them to say, you know what, this is what's really resonating. This is what the market wants to hear. So it's all valuable information. And I wanted to flag that because for anyone thinking and listening, going, oh, I really want to get on the phone too, there's so much value in it because you'll not only create results, but you will get market feedback as well.
Yeah, and that's very interesting and very beneficial and useful for your clients also, and for people who is going audience who will listen this episode. Is let's say as I said, like a workshop in some way today, because this is so and in a way, and I think that people like to hear like a practical side for you. Maybe we can deep in some example, or we can just say about XYZ company when come to you and you can and what they need and how do you run them through the process to start do cold calling for that company, XYZ, however.
Yes, yes. So I guess what we should do is kind of continue on with, because I started off saying, I've got this step-by-step process that I use whenever I pick up the phone. And I'd love to talk everyone through that. And the good news for listeners is that if you kind of follow this process, not only is it going to get you results because it's a proven process, but it's going to help you to actually develop your own script. So let's talk through it. So we've talked about preparation, right? And so if everyone's sitting there, like you've got your piece of paper out, you've got your note, your pen to take notes, I talked about the fact that step one is write some clear goals, write what your objectives are. Who do you want to speak to? What are the results you want to create? Whether that's 5 appointments, whatever it is. And then we did our preparation in terms of what the prospect, wants, what's in it for them. And that forms your elevator pitch. So you had asked me, Kristina, give us that one, go-to line.
Yeah, go to open line. Yeah, I asked
Exactly.
you. Yes, of course.
Yeah, and the elevator pitch is so crucial, right? It is that, 10-second grab, the thing that you is probably going to either make or break your call, because if you can't grab the attention of your audience within that short period, the call probably won't proceed any further. So there's a few tips that I've got for everyone listening when it comes to your elevator pitch. The first is, we have to go back to what I was talking about, that preparation of the what's in it for them. Include in your elevator pitch how you help people, the challenges you help them to overcome. So just like I mentioned earlier with the PromoDonna, some of the things that we do to help people is we alleviate them of the grunt work, we help them to grow their business. It might be we support their sales teams so that they can focus on what they do best, and that's converting new clients. So they're the things that you want to note down and create your elevator pitch with. So the other advice I'd give around, that introductory spiel as well is make up a couple of them. It's a real art form to get the elevator pitch right. And quite often when a client starts with us, we'll develop, say, 2 or 3 versions, and then we test it out in the market. So for listeners, write a couple of sentences. It should be short and sharp. It should be no more than, maybe 1 or 2 sentences long. It should be unique and different, not only about how you help people, but what sets you apart from your competition. So note down, 2 or 3 sentences, test it out, on the phone. And if you're a little nervous about testing it out on the phone to start with, another piece of advice I'd give is, go to a networking event. When we go to networking events, we're often, doing a 1-minute introductory spiel when we stand up, or when we walk in the door, people might say, well, what do you do? And you can test out that introduction when you're interacting with people at events, definitely.
Yeah, and as you said, if you go to B2B meeting, you can also test that elevator pitch, like to do intro 30 seconds, like in BNI, for example, people just it's in a way that people can have 30 seconds to do intro, or sometimes minutes, and you can test it out. You can also test that, or what you can do, I think that you can just record yourself and hear what you're going to say. To
That's
listen
a very good
yourself.
point. And you know what, Kristina, it's actually not a bad idea. And not only that, we talked on the last episode about AI and how we're, even as cold callers, really trying to embrace how it can make things easier for us. And not, I literally the other day did a role play session with AI because I wanted to test out an approach. And it not only was like giving good feedback, but it allowed me to hear out loud, okay, like, is this actually conversational? Because this is another point to make, right? So often people say to me, oh, but do you use a script? Like, doesn't it sound robotic? You don't want to read it verbatim. And that's correct. You want it to sound conversational. So that's another reason that my team and I, when it comes to the elevator pitch and all of our script, we will create a few different versions and we'll talk it through, we'll role play it. And then that will allow us to get a feel for, will this work on the phone, or does it sound too long? We'll highlight things, and it's all a process of testing and measuring. So that's my biggest piece of advice about the elevator pitch is create a few versions, test it out, and see what actually resonates with your market.
Yeah, and also when you wanted to test it out, you can call some of your families or neighbor, some people who are so in your life and very close to you, and say, okay, would you like, I would like to call you today, and I wanted to do some kind of cold call. Are you open to listen that and to hear how am I sound on the phone? That
Yes.
imagine that you're some person who I don't know. And I think that this is like a practical advice for people if you're so free in that way to connect and to talk with people who you know in your life.
Definitely. Yeah. Choose someone who's going to be, brutally honest with you because we know I've even had clients that are like, oh, let's do a role play. And then they're so nice, they never put any objections up front or anything. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I guess to continue talking through my step-by-step guide. So we've talked about preparation, mindset and preparing our information on the prospect. Then we've done a great elevator pitch. So that's like the first line of your script, obviously, is an introduction. And then the next step in my process is so key. And I'm going to give everyone my biggest piece of sales advice here. So if everyone takes nothing away from this session, but this piece of advice, I'll be really happy. So note this down, everyone, right? So years ago, when I started sales or, got into the sales industry, someone told me the person who talks the most in a sales situation is losing the sale. And I went, wow, that's so powerful, because often people think that they need to talk, 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 and that's selling. But it's actually the opposite that is true. And what I mean by this is, after you do an elevator pitch or that introduction, your role is to simply ask questions, because the prospect is not only then going to tell you whether they have a need or, for your products and services, but they're going to give you all the information you need to sell back to them. And my tip when it comes to to asking questions is to ask open-ended questions as well. Because, if you're asking a question like, do you cold call? They're going to say yes or no. And yes or no answers are like white rabbits. People will give you the no and run away. So I will always ask an open-ended question after I've done my elevator pitch. So I'll give everyone an example. Let's say the PromoDonna, I've rung up, I've said, hi, it's Ashleigh. I'm calling from the PromoDonna. We are a cold calling agency based in Australia. We generate high quality sales leads and appointments so that you don't have to do that sales grunt work and you can grow your business. Now, let me ask, how do you currently generate your leads in your business? So that's an open-ended question that will allow that person to tell me, are they doing any cold calling? Are they doing any lead generation? People might be inclined to say, oh, I don't do any lead generation, but I've been thinking about it, So it's going to open up the conversation and again
And
tell me.
those questions are from your area of business, that you
Yeah.
wanted to put that to see that company. As you said, do cold calling, because this is some very interesting for you to get to know, is that prospect for you or not in some way.
Yes. It has to align, that's spot on. It has to obviously align with your business and your services. And I would also say that the question should also kind of acknowledge pain points, that that you, like the prospects that have. So I'll try and give an example from a completely different industry, right? So let's say accounting. There's a lot of people that go, oh, cold calling wouldn't work. for accountants, but we've worked for accountants before. And, you might call someone up and say, again, it's Ashleigh from XYZ Accounting. We help all of our clients with, XYZ services. Tell me, do you currently have an accountant in place, and how are you finding the experience? Something like that will get the prospect talking and will tell you whether or not they're happy with their current provider, or, whatever the situation may be. But as you said, it's about asking questions that are relevant to your industry and will give you the right information to, again, be able to sell back to them.
And when you mention accountant or real estate, and I maybe people are audience is interesting. Which type of clients do you serve? Like, does that mean from different industries, for specific industries, or you can serve many of them?
Yeah, and this is a good question, because I think, for listeners as well, they may be thinking, is this relevant to me? Will, this kind of script work for me if you only work with this type of client? And I guess I'll say up front, I find that this script, that this process we're going through works for any type of industry, right? Which is great news. Whether you're selling a product or you're selling a service, you can definitely use this guide, this step-by-step guide, doing your elevator pitch, asking your questions, all of that. But to answer your question, Kristina, we tend to work mainly business to business at the PromoDonna. So mainly work with businesses, and we work a lot with service-based industries as well. So those that have a broad service range, and it's our role to, again, go in, find out what the point of pain is for these prospects and how they can help them, what service is going to help them. A lot of industries we work with include, IT, branding and design, HR. There is a very broad range, but I think, at its core, I would say the great news is this process will assist most businesses if they're trying to generate new leads.
Yeah, and when you work for those businesses, I think that you're not going to say, hello, is Ashleigh from PromoDonna.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to say, is Ashleigh from X, it's Ashleigh for A, for B, C, D company, because I know that in a previous episode when we do one, of course, we have done that. You mentioned that you and your team need to, and we mentioned that today, to learn and to research about your prospect. Who are you going to in that way to talk about? And like, for example, you mentioned accountant. You need to say it's Ashleigh from accountant agency. You're not going to say Ashleigh from PromoDonna when you are going to try to get it and do cold calling for that accountant agency.
That's right. Yeah. So we really pride ourselves on becoming like an extension of our client's team. And I think it's one of the advantages of outsourcing, isn't it? That, a lot of our clients, they might be small to medium businesses. They don't have, other staff to call for them. And that's why they're outsourcing to us. And saying, hi, it's Ashleigh from XYZ Accounting makes it seem like you've got a bigger team, but also very professional, that you've got someone on the front end generating leads for you. And what I love about it as well, I'll say, so this is probably a tip for everyone, that, doing cold calling yourself is great, but, actually getting like a team member or outsourcing it for yourself is also really advantageous, because when we're on the phone, we love that we can position our clients as the expert. So, for example, when I'm on the phone for that accountant, let's say, and we've done a great elevator pitch, we've asked some great questions, and suddenly that person says, oh, look, I do have an accountant, but I'm not that happy with them. We would then say, well, look, it sounds like it'd be really worthwhile for you to chat to our director, who is a qualified, certified, accountant. He can give you advice, whatever it may be. So yeah, we do. We call on behalf of the client. I think it gets the best results, and it's very advantageous to have someone on that front end generating leads for you, for sure.
And before that, of course, for your clients, you need, if when you talk in behalf of your client, you need to learn about that company. You need to know about something about accounting, about, that you talk instead of someone from that account agency. That's so your team just has a lot to learn before
Right.
before they go to the cold calling session for your
That's
clients.
right. But look, one thing I would also say, because you're spot on, there is, I think, sometimes a misconception or a concern, I would say, from a lot of people. Say people are sitting there thinking, well, I would love to outsource, but, I'm concerned that, a team like the PromoDonna, they wouldn't know how to speak like an IT person, or they wouldn't know how to speak like an accountant, or they wouldn't know everything about our business. The role of a cold caller or that salesperson initially, I think, is, like I mentioned, to position you as the expert. So, yes, we have to learn about the client and develop that script. But if ever we get into real nitty gritty like questions and complex questions, that's when we kind of palm it, to the client, that we say, look, they're the expert in what they do, and, this is where they'll kind of take over. But look, one thing I'd love to mention too, because as we're going through like this step-by-step guide
Yes, of
of the
course.
script, we're not done yet, right? So we've done preparation, we've done a great elevator pitch, we've asked some great questions. The other thing that we need to prepare for are objections. And I love objections, which a lot of people will go, what? How could you love objection? People
Yes.
think it's rejection, right? But I am such a big believer that an objection is a request for more information. People haven't yet seen the value in what you deliver. And so this is your opportunity to do that. So there's a few tips I'm going to give listeners, or a few different ways that you can overcome objections. The first one, which is my favorite, and this is key for everyone listening, it's to put the objection up front. Now, what do I mean by that? So if you are sitting there and you're thinking, well, we always get the objection that someone already has a provider, let's say, because this is a very common objection across the board for our clients. So I'll give you an example here of a client. We had a major signage company that we worked with. So this signage company was targeting all the retailers in Australia. So Sports Girl, Maya, all these big brands. And when we called these big brands, of course, the objection was, well, we already have a signage company we work with. We don't need you. So I said to my team, let's change the script so that we're acknowledging this objection up front, so they no longer can use that as an objection. So the elevator pitch or the introduction was something like this. Hi, it's Ashleigh. I'm calling from XYZ Signage. We are a major signage manufacturer and installer, and we work with retailers all across Australia. Now, I know that as a retailer, you would already have a provider in place. However, a lot of retailers we talk to, they do reviews or they open new stores, and quite often they'll look at new providers for these, solutions. And it was amazing how that totally flipped the conversation. Because what would happen is the retailers suddenly said, Oh, actually, yeah, we do have a review coming up of our providers and we'd love to talk to you. So that, may have been an opportunity. The other ones might have said something like, well, yeah, we do have a provider, but yes, we've got a store opening in 3 months. We'd be willing to kind of assess or evaluate your services and throw it in the mix. So I guess for listeners, again, if you have that common objection of, I've already got a provider. That's something that would come up for accountants ongoing, oh, I've already got a provider in place. So you put it with the elevator pitch to say, look, I understand that you are likely to have an accountant in place, but in our experience, people are often not that happy and may want to review who they have in place. Would that be true for you? Something like that. So putting the objection up front is key. The other two ways you can handle objections is to solution sell. So that's, again, always having like a reason or an answer overcoming that objection. So like I just gave with the provider already being in place, look, we understand that you might already have a provider in place. However, most, people I talk to, they're not that happy with their current provider. Tell me about your current experience. And then last but not least, with objection handling, empathy is really important. So if someone gives you an objection, it's really important to say something like, look, I unfortunately understand, what you're talking about. For cold calling, sometimes we get the objection of, oh, we've used a telemarketing agency before and the quality just was not there. I would say something like, look, unfortunately in our industry, there's a lot of people who experience this, but let me tell you how we're different. Something along those lines. So that's objection handling.
Oh, it's very interesting, and just for audience who you will listen to this, just think about objections and
Yeah.
use these tips and advices what Ashley said. This is going to be so useful for you when you decide to do more cold callings.
Definitely. And I think, we started off, Kristina, talking about our mindset and shifting our sales mindset. And such a big barrier for people to pick up the phone is, again, oh, I'm going to get objections or I'm going to get knocked back. And hopefully those tips, especially the one of putting the objection up front, might make you feel a little more confident in handling those conversations. And so if we look at that process, that we're following, we've done the preparation, we've done a great elevator pitch, we've asked some great questions and hopefully got all this juicy information. Then they might have put an objection out there and we've handled that. And so the last step in the process is the close. Now, I often say to people that if you've done a great job of following the process we've gone through today, the close may be inevitable, which is fantastic. So, you might have a situation where someone says something like, okay, great. Well, you've talked to me about how you're different from my other provider. What's the next step? And then you can take it further, whether that's an appointment or writing a proposal, whatever it may be. But the other thing is that, some people will say, well, what if that doesn't happen? What if I need to ask for the close and I'm not feeling that confident about it? There's a few little tips I can give people to, again, give you ideas around how you can make closing a little easier. The first is to use assumptive language or the assumptive close. Now, what do I mean by this? If you talk as if they're going forward with you, it almost has them shift their mindset into that focus. So I'll give you an example here that when the PromoDonna, when we start with a client, they run a workshop session with us, which I think you mentioned, Kristina. So if I'm in a meeting or I'm on the phone and I'm talking to someone and I'm hoping they're going to go ahead with us, I will use the assumptive language like, now, when we run the workshop session, who are you going to include in that session? So I'm already buying into, well, you're going to do the session with me. You've already come on board. And again, it helps them to shift that mindset into, yep, we're already going ahead. Who will we get in that meeting? So assumptive close is really important. And then the other closing technique that I love to use is the now or never close. So for listeners, this is really great for maybe discounts that you're offering, or creating a sense of urgency with people. And I'll actually give you an example here of when someone used it on me, which I loved. So someone rang me up once and they were a part of a women's networking group, and I'm involved in a lot of these groups, but I actually hadn't renewed my membership, and this woman was trying to re-sign me. And so she said to me, Ash, we haven't had your membership renewed. Tell me a little bit about where you're at, something like that. And she said, I just wanted to let you know we've got a lot of speaking opportunities coming up. And of course, my eyes lit up. I was like, I'd really love to do these speaking opportunities. How can I lock these in? And she said, well, you just have to sign up for the membership. So she created that sense of urgency for me to buy so that I could get what I wanted. So if you have that prospect on the phone that's a little bit hesitant, that's where you can sometimes bring in things like the now or never, well, if we met now, there's actually this promotion we've got going on, or time frames, things like that are really key. But yeah, the close, that's what comes about as a result of following that process. And if you don't have it just come about the way you want it to, there's a few little techniques you can put into play.
Amazing. And actually, when you set out all these steps, all this mindset, like a preparation and goals and elevator and pitch and everything, do you use is this going to be in one call, or you need when you call someone to have time to do all those steps when you start with calling one prospects for your clients?
This is a great question. Yeah, look, I would say that if you are having a conversation with a decision maker, then you could definitely follow this whole process through, right? So if I am calling like a sales manager and I want to talk with them about their lead generation or cold calling, I can certainly, ask great questions, try to overcome the objection, try to get that key outcome I want with the close. Like, okay, great. Well, the next step is let's have a meeting, or let's make a time, whatever it may be. But I think, if you are using your script and you're not talking with the right person, that definitely may have you only follow a few steps of the process. Like, you might do a great elevator pitch, you might ask some key questions, but they might also then say, look, the person you need to speak to is John Smith, whoever it may be. So I think that's a good point to drum home, that this process, this script works, but it probably works a lot better if you're talking with or speaking to the right decision maker.
And I think that you also think about who you will speak to. Like you have to choose that you have to speak with sales manager or marketing manager before you start your cold calling. Do your research. Who is the most important person for that call in that company?
Exactly. It's so key. It's a really great point to raise that, if people are listening and thinking, yeah, I'm going to do it, I'm going to make my cold calls, the script is great. That's going to give you the confidence to say what you need to say. But yeah, taking it a step back, that preparation when you're looking at all the information you're going to contain in the script, another element of making your calls or sales successful is develop a really great list for yourself. because I often say to clients, we at the PromoDonna are only as good as our list. Because if they give us a list, and trust me, we've had some doozies, right, where they go, no, this is a really great list. And then we start calling on it, and we realize the clients or the companies are not a good fit for them. They're not the size they want to deal with, or the decision makers on the list are not featured, or the numbers aren't there. I would say to everyone, take your time and build a great list of your ideal clients. So that's not only the type of company you want to work with, but yes, a decision maker. And, kind of touching on what you said, Kristina, having a name is key, because when you pick up that phone, let's say I want to talk to the sales manager, and it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the right person, but when you pick up that phone, that receptionist, if you say something like, look, who would look after sales? She knows that you're a caller, and it's going to be a red flag of, I'm not going to put them through. Whereas if I call and I say, look, I understand that John Smith currently looks after sales, the sales department. Is that correct? It's kind of getting her on site to go, oh, maybe they've had dealings with John before. Maybe I should put her through. And even kind of aligning with her to say, look, is John still the best person to talk to, or is there someone else that looks after lead generation? Get them on side. But gatekeepers and receptionists are a whole other conversation.
But before you go there, and you can see, you create a list of potential prospects for your client, for account, let's say, whoever. And when you go there, how do you choose? If you see on a website, how do you come on that way that you can really come to that person? Like if you have two, three persons, how do you get there? Do consultation with someone before, or you go only just to research it? Because and maybe you have conversation with other people to get to know that John Smith is just really, or John XYZ is really person for your call.
Yeah. And again, this is such a great question, because what I guess I drum home to people is that your role, if you're doing cold calling or sales on the phone, you're almost like a bit of an investigator, because quite often when a client starts with us, they will have a number of decision makers that we may need to talk to. So let's say we're working for an IT company. We've got a lot of IT clients. They might say to me, Ash, we would like to speak with either the CFO or the IT manager. And so we've got a couple of names on the list that we've generated, but we don't want to waste our time researching online. That's one thing I'll say to everyone. I find a lot of people try to research. If you pick up the phone, that's your best way of finding out who's the best person to talk to. So when we pick up the phone, we do that introduction. A little bit like I mentioned, I might say to the receptionist, look, I'm calling from XYZ IT company. We have, John Smith listed as the IT manager. Would he be best to talk to about your current IT services arrangements? Or is it, Bill who's in finance, and kind of do that research. And even then, when you call through and you get through to say John in IT, the investigation or the investigating continues, because I might say to John, look, I'm calling on behalf of XYZ IT firm. We support IT people in their role like yourself. Are you the person that arranges, any outsourcing that you do? And he might say, well, no, it's Bill in finance. So I think, yeah, it's a really good point to make, that along with the script, list development is key. Develop a great list, have a few options up your sleeve of who you should speak to, but be aware that when you are on the phone, that investigating will have to happen.
Yeah, and when you mentioned you call receptionist, or who do you get the first person there? That person you can ask, and that person can help you to get to the right person. when you
That's
open
right.
up your call. Okay, all good, you know. So the time consuming today, and I know that we have you are so and you're very busy with other meetings and clients. So before we are going to ramp up our call today because and for audience, just to let you know that we will have a few series of this. We will continue talking about cold calling and scripts and practical scripts and other things, and we'll have a lot to cover in new episodes. So Ashley, do you have something to share with maybe freebie or something like that on your script or on your website? So I will put those links and that audience can just go there and download or
Yeah,
connect with you or
fantastic.
however.
I would love that opportunity. So, yes, I will share with Kristina some links. One of those will be a script template. So, exactly what we've spoken through today, that step by step guide. The great thing is that is the information that will complete or fill out the script for you. So, just like we mentioned, you put your goals at the top and then your elevator pitch and your questions. You can see the script template kind of flows in that way. And then on top of that, I would love to offer everyone a free consultation of sorts. So, as you mentioned a few times, I do a lot of like coaching and training, which I'm really passionate about. And I do offer like a free, like no obligation session for people. And this could be ideal if you're sitting listening, going, oh, I really want to put that script together. I really want to know how it works. But if you're struggling with it a little bit, use the link, book in for the session. I'd love to talk you through it. And I might be able to use my expertise to go, based on other experience, I can help you to complete this and add in some extra things. So I'll send those links through.
That's great. And don't forget to go to the promodonna.com
Yes.
and you have all links there. And Ash is on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. And also don't forget to subscribe and to follow the KSM podcast Doing Business On with Kristina to get notification when we are going to have a new episode. For this time, thanks for watching. Thanks again, and thank you so very much, Ash, to be with us today. And see you very soon in our new episodes. Thanks a lot, and have a lovely day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye bye.